review meeting of the Health and Adult Social Care panel. The chair of the panel, Councilor Lawson, has sent apologies, which means that the first item of business this afternoon is to elect a chair for today's meeting. So could I just seek nominations for chair? Councillor Firth.
Can I move Councillor Munro?
Is that seconded? Any other nominations? Are we all happy for Councillor Munro to take the chair?
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Councilor Munro and I'm going to be your chair for today for the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny panel. And I'd like to welcome you all. Please be aware that this meeting is being webcast. And before we commence the meeting, I would like to request that those of you with mobile phones switch them off to minimise disruption of the proceedings. Thank you. For those of you who are not familiar with the arrangements, can I first introduce you to the various parties that will be involved in this process? So the panel sat in the centre are members of the Adult Health and Social Care panel, and I'd like to introduce them. I'd like you to introduce yourselves, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Eric Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Jane Ryler, Home Valley South.
Thank you, Chair. Tim Bamford, Denberdale Ward.
Hello, Kim Taylor, Voluntary Co-op Tea.
Helen Clay, Voluntary Co-op Tea.
Councillor Habib and Zaman, Batley East.
Thank you very much. The officers who are sitting at either side of me are Nicola Sylvester and Lee Webb, and they will be supporting the panel during the meeting. Thank you. Sheila Dykes from the governance team is at the back of the room, and she will be able to clarify any queries you may have during the course of the proceedings. To my left are the signatories to the call-in. They are here to provide evidence and answer questions on those areas of the call-in that the panel is focusing on. To my right is Councillor Beverly Addy, who is the Cabinet Member with responsibility for health and social care. And she is here to provide evidence as the decision maker and answer the panel's questions. The Cabinet Member is supported by a number of officers who also sit on the right-hand side. Thank you. The aim of today is for the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny panel to consider very carefully issues raised by the notice of call-in by listening to the views and supporting evidence from the signatories to the call-in, the Council's decisions makers, councils of the authority and members of the public. In terms of the arrangements for the meeting, we will be following a strict timetable which has been handed out. We have structured the meeting to try to allow sufficient time and opportunity for the panel to hear the breadth of relevant evidence on issues raised in the call-in. The panel members will hear all perspectives to assist them in coming to a balanced view and inform their conclusions. I would like to remind everyone that we are looking to conduct a fair and responsible review, and wherever possible, I would like people to adhere to the time allocated to address the scrutiny panel. I realise that people feel very, very passionately about this issue, but would ask that everyone behaves in a respectful way so that the panel can hear from all parties and within the timescales allocated. If you are speaking, please do not repeat any points which have already been raised by other speakers. I would also like to ask people to remain quiet when someone is speaking. I'd also like to remind everyone that we are here to specifically review two areas raised in the notice of call-in. The panel will focus on openness and relevant considerations. People addressing the panel need to focus on these areas. I would also wish to stress to all of you present here today that the scrutiny panel does not have the power to overturn the Cabinet decision. However, After taking account of all the evidence that has been presented today, the panel may recommend that the Cabinet consider making amendments to the decision. It will be up to the Cabinet to decide whether it wishes to accept the Scrutiny panel's recommendations. Finally, I want to emphasise that Scrutiny is here today to provide an independent review of the decision. Whatever outcome the panel reaches today, I wish to assure everyone that the members of this panel have not prejudged their conclusion and will reach a decision based solely on the balance of the facts as they have been presented. So, just move to the formal agenda. So, membership of the panel, declarations of interest.
Membership of panel, Councillor Lawson has sent apologies.
Oh yes, so moving on to the agenda, item 2, membership of the panel. Are there any apologies to note? I think it's just Councillor Joe Lawson. So does agenda item 3, does anybody have a declaration of interest? If so, please complete the form. For admission of the public. Do I need to read this out? Most agenda items take place in public. This only changes when there is a need to consider exempt information as contained at Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. You will be informed at this point which items are to be recommended for exclusion and to be resolved by the panel. Sorry. Item 3. Okay, members of the public are welcome at today's meeting and we expect to be able to hear all evidence in public. In the event that we require information from officers which must be heard in private because, for example, it may contain commercially sensitive information or details concerning an individual, then we will advise that we need to move into private session. I'd just also like to remind you that you use your microphones when speaking. Can I also please ask those addressing the panel to introduce themselves before speaking? Thank you. Agenda item 4. Call-in. So, moving on to agenda item 5, call-in of the future of council-operated dementia care home provision, Castle Grange and Claremont House. Sorry? I will now ask Councillor Andrew Cooper, as spokesperson for the signatories, to outline the reasons for calling in the decision made by Cabinet on the 10th of December 2024. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew Cooper, I'm a councillor for the Newsham ward. In our submission, proposing a call-in of this Cabinet decision, we sought to show the Cabinet had not properly considered all the factors that led to the decision, or were not furnished with the information they needed to come to a decision. The Cabinet member is on record as saying that she is gutted to be pursuing the privatisation of these homes, and I will seek to show that this decision should be reconsidered in the light of the evidence. I'll start by making the point that since this proposal was first floated, the Council has been provided with additional, unbudgeted for millions as part of the local government settlement, which should more than provide the flexibility needed to abandon these proposals. No proper consideration has been demonstrated assessing the risks of transferring the homes to the private sector, given the huge instability caused by the rise in national insurance employers' national insurance contributions. Families have been excluded from meaningful discussions with details withheld under commercial confidentiality. Concern about increased costs, continuity of care, and potential closures remain unanswered. Families fear steep fee hikes and third-party top-ups, making care unaffordable and risking forced relocations that could severely harm residents. In the Cabinet report of the 10th of December 2024, the Council acknowledges the family's concerns, namely, there was concern that the homes may not remain as dementia care homes. Families are interested in knowing what, if any, restrictions will be in place to mitigate the immediate changes to the service. The council's response was as follows. They, the families, have also been advised of the confidential nature of the procurement process and that a limited amount of information can be shared with them at this time. For the families, that is not satisfactory or at all reassuring. Families are very complimentary about the excellent and high quality care currently received by residents at both homes. Concerns were raised about whether the quality of care would be maintained post-transfer to a private provider. The council's response was to suggest that the homes will be overseen by the contracts team, which deliver proactive, targeted support in partnership with the NHS and other key partners around improving the quality of care to regulated care providers in the borough. Critically, however, they say staffing levels will be at the discretion of the new provider, and that will have a direct impact on the quality of care. Families are extremely concerned about the potential increase in the costs of care and the possibility that top-up fees will be introduced. The council's response was, any increase in fees will be at the discretion of the new provider. The council will continue to contribute to care costs for low-income residents based on the outcome of a financial assessment. The families have stated clearly their opposition to this proposal and are keen to know what will happen should a suitable provider not be found. The council's response is to indicate there is no alternative to a private provider, since doing nothing is not an option, and they have once again raise the prospect of closure. This is despite families being told by senior council officers following the rescinding of the previous closure notice that the homes would be safe for the next 3 to 5 years. There has been a lack of transparency over the financial rationalisation for privatisation. The report of the 8th of October gave estimated savings of 1.2 million to 2 million. But for the 10th of December, this was reduced to 0.8 million. No really detailed explanation was given for this reduction. Both of the Cabinet reports from the 2024's privatisation proposal have stated only stated figures from the full financial year 23-24. And last year's finance presentation and Cabinet report stated figures based on the same year's budget, but no actuals. None of the reports across both attempts to dispose of the homes from reference data for any other year. Castle Grange costs were around 418k over budget, but Claremont House was only very slightly over by 5k. But no explanation has been provided for this overspend, or why one home is significantly over while the other has met the budget. There are some real concerns about the income data. Based on the Freedom of Information request submitted on the 5th of November 24, income that the council was owed amounted to 730k for an average occupancy rate of 57%. Scaled up to full occupancy, the owed income could amount to almost 1.3 million per year. The homes have been only operating at 57% occupancy, meaning more income should be generated by filling the homes. The homes were left unfilled due to the Cabinet decision in December 2023 to halt all new entrants during the closure proposals. Why was almost half of the staff budget spent on Reed specialist recruitment, which is expensive? This is the inefficient use of money and in terms of using agency staff. But was this due to the uncertainty over the home's future? So 23-24 was not a normal year on which to base a decision over the home's future. The Cabinet decision is financially unnecessary. The case is unproven and not in the best interests of residents or their families. And the decision should be referred back by this panel to Cabinet for them to look afresh at the financial case behind the decision, and for them to consider what privatising these homes says about their values and about a council service that is valued by residents and their families.
So would any of the other signatories now like to make any additional comments? Right. Okay. So it's Councillor John Lawson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for attending and thanks for arranging for me to attend online. I just didn't think it was safe for me to attend and sort of spread the dangerous clue that I have at the moment. First, let's start. I'd like to begin by agreeing and aligning myself with Councillor Cooper's analysis. I think that's it's quite detailed and quite cogent in the areas that it covers. I'd like to reiterate and go into a little bit more detail about one of the parts of it, though, and that's those discrepancies in some of the financial rationale for the cabinet decision. There should have been some really big red flags waved during that process. The fact that this decision was progressed should, in itself, be of concern for this scrutiny panel. Some of the methodology of work in arriving at the key figures in the running costs and the staffing costs looks inconsistent. An example would be the way that those agency costs that Councillor Cooper mentioned have contributed to direct costs at the year end 23-24, which in turn skewed the net figures relied on to build part of the case. This call-in has been limited to aspects of openness of financial aspects, but if, as I believe it should be, this decision is referred back to Cabinet, there has to be an opportunity to work more closely with residents and relatives. The inconsistencies in the financial evidence has made their experience unnecessarily distressing at a time when they most needed hard facts and evidence that they could rely on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. I'd now like to ask Councillor Arshad to speak. Thank you.
I have a statement from Councillor Joe Lawson, who's unable to attend today, but feels very strongly about making her presence heard. So if I was to read, my motives are not to score political points, but to ensure due diligence and process around the financial concerns that form the call-in have been followed with transparency.
Hello, sorry, excuse me, I'm going to have to stop you there. You can only read out the areas of focus. You can only speak on the areas of focus,
which is the financial concerns, which I've covered. So that is what I'm in the process of covering. But I'll move it straight on to the financial concerns if you like.
Thank you.
In October 2024 Cabinet, we were told potential savings were in the range of 1.8 to 2 million. Just 2 short months later, the potential savings are now circa 800,000. I sincerely hope that the panel today have been furnished with the appropriate financial data on potential savings and why it was first thought the potential savings were circa 1.8 million and now circa 800,000. In my mind, a decision should not have been made in December using potentially flawed data. It begs the question what financial data was given to Cabinet and to Councillor Addy as portfolio holder to base their decision on. If this question is not satisfactorily answered, then I urge the panel to uphold the call-in on the financial grounds it is being held today. Another question that the panel needs to reflect on is why we only have 1 year's financial data used to base potential savings to Kirklees. Should the 2 homes be privatised, 23 to 24, saw the 2 homes under-occupied due in part to a wing at Castle Grange being utilised for daycare, losing, I believe, 10 beds. Was Cabinet supplied with the financial data and projected financial data for other years when occupancy would have had potentially been somewhat higher? Given the financial constraints Kirklees finds itself in, why was nearly half the wage bill, which was 1.8 million or thereabouts, spent on agency staff? I'm aware that agency spend was authorised at a Cabinet meeting, but once it was agreed to keep the 2 homes open and look for potential buyers, why were staff not recruited, even if this was on temporary contracts or on a casual 0-hour contract basis? Why was so much money wasted on agency costs? I sincerely hope that the panel has been given answers to the question raised at the lines of inquiry as to how much would have been saved had staff been employed directly by Kirklees and not via an agency. I would urge all panel members to look at all the evidence given today, and if you're not satisfied, then uphold the call-in and ask Cabinet to rethink its decision. And if I can kindly ask to move on to a statement that I've prepared. Is that okay?
Apologies, you can speak as long as you can continue as long as it's in relation to the areas of focus. Thank you.
Yep, of course. So the proposal to privatise our dementia care homes has left service users, their families and their public deeply concerned, not just about the quality of care, but about the lack of diligence shown by Kirklees Council in handling this matter. And again, this is financial led. When pressed for clarity on the financial justification, the numbers provided by the councils have been playing musical chairs. Figures have changed, estimates have been shifted, and key income streams have been overlooked. This alone demonstrates that the council has been winging it. This is not the behaviour of a body that is treating this issue with the seriousness that it deserves. What is at stake here is far greater than any balance sheet. This decision would transfer essential care services for some of our most vulnerable residents into the hands of private companies whose primary focus is profit and not people. The public's concern is that under private ownership, the quality of care will decline as cost-cutting measures are inevitably prioritised. Dementia care is not a business, it is a lifeline that requires compassion, dedication and expertise, values that cannot be guaranteed in the private sector. By failing to present a robust, transparent financial case and instead relying on incomplete or shifting figures, Kirklees Council has shown that they are not taking this matter seriously. This lack of due diligence undermines a trust and demonstrates a worrying disregard for the very people you are meant to serve. I urge you to reject this proposal until it is backed by credible, thorough financial review, in which you'll find that we can continue running these homes ourselves. Until then, assure the service users that their care will remain a priority and not an afterthought. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I understand, Councillor Safdell, that you'd like to speak now? Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of brief questions. Yeah. So, a couple of questions actually for the panel, and so what can?
Apologies, it's not questions. You can.
A couple of short points. Yeah. So what contingency plans are there regarding if the private operators struggle to maintain the buildings? So what plans are in place, and are the panel aware?
Apologies. You can't. It's not a time to ask questions. Okay. It's evidence that we're asking for. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come to that later then. Okay, thank you.
Right. So do any? So I'd like to ask now the panel. Do you have any issues or? Oh. Sorry, I didn't have you written down on my list. I do apologise. If you'd like to speak now, thank you. It cannot be obviously a question. It has to be evidence. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. In relation, I have some concerns in relation to the financial justification for this decision, and it's based on the figures presented, which are calculated on average costs, which are stated to be £853. And yet we know that these homes serve the high-end needs of dementia care. When people need dementia care, there's varying degrees of it. And we also, I just think when we're doing these calculations and using an average, we're not comparing like for the real costs of high-end needs of dementia care. It also leaves these people incredibly vulnerable, because the private sector can refuse to provide care or can evict, and whereas the council has a duty to, basically the private sector could hold the council over a barrel over people's care. Meanwhile, people will suffer in that process. So instead of using 1 year's data, which is outdated, and we know after the during the pandemic and immediately after, the number of people taking up residential care reduced due to fears, but I believe the market is getting back to normal levels. And instead of using that 1 year's data, we should be basing any decisions, financial decisions now, based on the future demands of higher end needs dementia care.
Thank you. So, do any panel members wish to raise any issues of clarification on what the signatories have just been saying? Thank you. So I'd now like to ask any councillors to participate in this meeting. It's an opportunity for you to come forward to give evidence on the issues raised on the areas of focus in the call-in. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Hello, Councillor Marchington, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Having heard the statement from the signatories about the concerns about financial matters and openness and transparency, that's again one of my concerns as well. We've heard the phrase used about financial information subject to commercial confidentiality. And I think it's very concerning when issues like that, where full financial disclosure is not made. And it would be interesting to know if Cabinet members have been made aware of all the financial information relating to particularly that of a commercial sensitive nature. I think also the other question, based on other things that have happened in the council about openness and transparency, has the full financial facts been made available to any members of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee or the panel? Because again, that might be, if it's in a commercially sensitive, we agree that it needs to be kept confidential, but somebody needed to be looking at that. So that's a concern that I have. Again, it fits in with the openness and transparency, full financial disclosure. I think following on again from what others have said about the just 1 year's financial data, and I think to make a decision like this, a multi-year approach needed to be made to financial planning. And yes, there might be savings in one particular area. I think the figure 850,000 has been made. But what's the consequential costs on the other side of that if those people have been cared for in private sector homes? It's not a zero-sum game. And then surely they should have been looking at a multi-year approach, because if these homes are moved from council control into private control, and the residents are looked after, it's a long-term basis, and it's not just with 1 year. So I think it's a concern that multi-year financial information has not been looked at, and the full picture, not just the savings to the council, but the consequential costs of that. And I think we ought to include that, the costs to families as well, whether they're having to pay for that directly out of their own resources or they're receiving some other support. So it is following that, and we need to know about, has all that information been looked at? Has it been looked at over a multiple number of years? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. So do panel members want to ask any for any clarification on that point, of those points? Thank you. Right, public participation. We've got 30 minutes, so I'd like to invite, is it Sarah first? Avalon, where is that?
On page 3.
Okay, sorry, I'd like to invite Avalon Rawling to speak, please. Thank you. Apparently it's not Avalon first. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Apologies. That's there's a slight mistake on my list. Okay. So I'd like to invite Donna Mallinson first, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Donna, and my mum, Elaine's home is currently Claremont House. I am here to highlight the consistent gaps in the financial case for the privatisation of Claremont House and Castle Grange. The Cabinet has not provided clear, detailed answers to basic questions about the evidence underpinning this decision, despite repeated requests. And without these answers, this decision cannot be shown to be rational. Firstly, all cost data referenced in published material relates solely to the financial year 2023 to 2024. But this was not a typical year due to partial closures, recruitment freezes and income loss. Yet no multi-year analysis has been published to account for these factors. Councillor Addy has claimed that a multi-year analysis was included in a previous report, yet no such data appeared in that report. And despite commitments to provide it, this has still not happened. Secondly, at the full council meeting on the 16th of October, Mike Forster asked how private providers could reduce costs, estimated to be over £400 per person per week, compared to in-house provision. The response was vague, lower operating costs, but with no detailed breakdown provided. Thirdly, councillors have repeatedly raised concerns about changes to health and social care funding from central government and the local care market. Indeed, these were raised just minutes before the Cabinet voted to proceed with privatisation, yet no substantive analysis of these impacts has been shared. And finally, the estimated private sector cost of £853 per person per week has not been substantiated. The intersection between good care and the moderate to severe dementia care provided at Claremont House and Castle Grange has not been transparently addressed in this figure. All these gaps reflect a consistent failure to provide the financial evidence that should underpin this decision. If the financial case is as strong as this Cabinet claims, then why hasn't the evidence been publicised? Therefore, this panel must recommend the immediate publication of a transparent, evidence-based financial analysis, because without this, this decision cannot be rationally justified. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Sarah Blackborough to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Sarah, and my mum, Janet, has been a resident at Castle Grange for over 2 years. Just to put it into context, my mum, Janet, needs every aspect of her life supported. So she needs personal care, feeding, clothing, bathing. And so she is very vulnerable, and any changes to her care would have a significant impact. So I'm here to address how the lack of financial transparency raises fears that the risks and impacts of privatisation have not been properly evaluated. Without a robust analysis of risks, the claimed savings cannot be shown to be valid. Firstly, families are concerned about the impact on quality of care. On the 16th of October, a family member, Kirklees Senior, shared documented examples of poor practices in private care homes in Kirklees. These included neglect and inadequate staffing. The Cabinet references robust processes for monitoring care quality, but despite these processes, no evidence has been provided to show how similar issues will be avoided in the future. Secondly, families have asked for assurances that these homes will remain specialist dementia care facilities. On the 16th of October, another family member, Sarah Newton, requested this guarantee. While Councilor Addy stated they would negotiate with providers specialising in dementia care, she had previously admitted during the Cabinet meeting on the 8th of October that the Council cannot guarantee long-term outcomes. Thirdly, staff concerns have been ignored. These homes rely on highly trained carers with expertise in dementia care. 2P regulations provide limited protection, and without guarantees on terms and conditions, there is a significant risk of staff turnover, impacting care quality and leading to additional costs. Finally, the financial risk of private provider failure has not been addressed. Several councillors raised this issue, yet the Cabinet has not explained how it would cover the additional costs of dealing with a failed provider, which has been documented in other councils across the UK. The financial risks and their potential costs have not been transparently evaluated. If the case for privatisation is as strong as the Cabinet claims, why is this analysis missing? Therefore, I urge this panel to recommend for a comprehensive analysis of further costs and risks. Without this, the decision cannot be shown to be rational or proportional. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Alison. Alison Hodgson to speak. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alison Hodgson, and my mother is currently a resident in Claremont House and has been for just over 2 years now. I'm reading this statement out on a lady called Angela, who is from the Unison Department. We care about the residents of Castle Grange and Claremont, which is why we do not want the jobs that we do, which is why we do not do the jobs we do. First and foremost, we care about what's best for them, which is why we share the concerns of the relatives about the council's plan to privatise the homes. But we also care about what is best for us, for both these residents, and we oppose the privatisation plans. There can be no doubt about what privatisation will mean for the staff and work in the homes. We know because the bidders have confirmed that they have not allowed us to remain in the local government pension scheme. We know that instead they will offer us typical private sector pensions. We know that the typical private sector pensions are much worse than the original pensions. Kirklees Council pays the equivalent of 15.8% of our salary into our pension, but the most private companies pay just 4%. So a typical private sector pension would reduce the amount that our employer pays in from £3,775 each year to just £956. Nobody would claim that they were well paid for in the work that we do. But working for the council means that our pay is determined by job evaluation. So we are paid the rate for our job. This ensures that we receive equal pay to men who do jobs that have been evaluated at the same grade as ours. We also receive the annual cost of living pay rises that are negotiated nationally with the trade unions. If the privatisation does go ahead, the new employer is not legally obliged to maintain our current rates of pay. All they are required to do is pay the national living wage, which is currently £11.44 an hour. We are currently paid £13.08 an hour, plus 20% when working nights. We could be facing a pay cut of £4 per hour on top of the cut to our pensions. This would mean a pay cut of £7,700 per year and a cut to our pension contributions of £2,819. It is obvious to see where the savings will come from. It is obvious to see that the 2p does not provide any protection to pay and pensions.
Excuse me, sorry to stop you there, but do you think you could just talk on the financials, on the
I'm just reading out a statement that's been given to me.
All right, okay, thank you.
Can I carry on? Yes. It is obvious that the privatisation is about cost savings at the expense of staff. It is inevitable that such drastic cuts to pay and pensions will affect the quality of care that is provided to the vulnerable residents. There is a chronic national staffing crisis in adult social care. There are 12,500 vacancies in Yorkshire and Humberside alone. This is due to the poor pay and conditions paid by private care companies. Private care companies get away with paying such low wages because the care workforce is predominantly female and there are no male comparators to keep pay at a fair level. It is morally wrong to privatise women's jobs and consign us to pay poverty pay and reliance on in-work benefits. Currently it is not a staff retention problem at Castle Grange and Claremont, but this is likely to change with privatisation. We believe we deserve to be treated better than this, but more importantly, we believe that the residents that we care for are to be treated better than this. We implore you to put a stop to the privatisation in order to protect the vulnerable residents.
I'm sorry, I'll have to stop you there. You've had 5 minutes.
I've just finished.
All right, thank you. So, do panel members Sorry. Oh, sorry. Is Avalon next? I thought she'd spoken. Okay. I'd like to call Avalon Rawlings. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to focus here on two key principles: rationality and proportionality.
Okay.
The panel's role is to ensure that the Cabinet's decision is both rational and proportional. Based on the lack of evidence shared so far, it's difficult to see how those standards will be met. First of all, rationality requires proof that the net cost of in-house provision is higher than the equivalent cost in private ownership.
Oh, yes.
But there are two problems there. The in-house cost estimates that have been given rely on the single year's data that's been mentioned before. No apparent adjustments for exceptional circumstances and consideration of missed income opportunities. The other half of that equation, £853 per person per week, is unsubstantiated. It lacks detail on the quality of care, the level of need, and other variables that determine the true cost of specialist, high-level dementia care needs. The second part of that is proportionality. That requires that the anticipated savings outweigh the risks. Even if there are savings to be made, the risks could still be greater. Future wage increases, private provider failures, and the secondary costs to residents and staff have not been demonstrated to have been evaluated or costed. And finally, with respect to the Council's market shaping duty, there has not been an analysis of the long-term impact on Council resilience. If the Council exits the market entirely, how can it respond to future crises or rising demand for dementia care? These critical risks have not been covered, at least not in the public material that has been shared. These are not abstract concerns, these are legal requirements, and the Cabinet carries the burden of proof to show that the decision is rational and proportional. Without transparent financial evidence, this burden has not been met. So I call upon the panel to recommend the immediate publication of all financial evidence and risk assessments underpinning this decision. Without it, the panel cannot fulfil its duty to scrutinise this decision effectively. Thank you.
Do panel members wish to raise any issues of clarification on the points raised by families? Thank you. I'd like to invite Councillor Beverly Addy to come and speak as Cabinet Portfolio Holder. Thank you. You have 40 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Scrutiny panel, fellow councillors and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel today regarding the decision to progress the potential sale of Castle Grange and Claremont House as going concerns. Before officers and I respond specifically to questions, I wanted to convey that I appreciate the thorough review and concerns raised by the Scrutiny Committee, and I'm here to address those issues comprehensively. I want to assure the committee that the well-being of our residents, their families and our dedicated staff is of utmost importance to us. The decision to pursue the transfer of these care homes was not taken lightly. It was made after extensive consultation, detailed financial analysis, and careful consideration of the long-term sustainability of our care services across Kirklees. It is important to note that Cabinet considerations for the future of these care homes go back to September 2023, when the Council explored potential closure of both homes. We listened to the feedback from consultation then, and we continue to acknowledge concerns now. Our goal has always been to recognise and address the concerns of families of residents and of our staff, and to ensure the highest quality of care and continuity of care for all our residents. However, these are difficult times and we are facing financial challenges. This decision aims to secure the long-term sustainability of our care services, ensuring that a landscape of high-quality care is available to service users across the whole spectrum of care and across the whole of our borough. Officers and I want to assure you of the transparency in this process, and we will provide responses to each of the questions that have been raised by the panel. I'm going to briefly give you some overview, and then the officers will give you some financial detail. The financial analysis which informs the proposal for the transfer of both care homes is based on a multi-year analysis of historical financial performance data alongside future projections on financial viability. The savings have been modelled on the budgeted costs for each care home based on high occupancy and full staffing. These budgets are currently factored into the Council's medium-term financial strategy. The savings estimates have not changed. The figures referenced in the Cabinet reports represent different views of the same analysis, but with or without non-cashable overheads. Officers will take you through more detail on this shortly. Both care homes have been open to new residents, admissions, and recruitment has continued to be carried out within both care homes to increase the number of substantive staff employed and reduce the need for agency workers. Agency staffing costs, agency staff used to ensure safe staffing levels across both homes from April 23 to March 24 were £397,361, so just under £400,000, not 1.8 million as stated in the questions. Care homes often use agency staff to respond to a number of operational needs, workforce challenges, and to ensure safe staffing levels. Efforts to reduce the cost of short-term staffing are enacted on an ongoing basis. However, the levels of agency staff use of 10% is completely in line with the national average of agency worker use across social care, which ranges from 7 to 12%. Ours is 10%. The vast majority of residential care in England is delivered via independent sector organisations. The independent sector's ability to manage costs differently allows them to operate homes viably. The difference in operational and financial dynamics underpins the Council's decision to consider transferring the homes to private operators. I've said this before, but it doesn't make it any less true that I acknowledge how difficult this decision might be for family members, and I do regret that the residents and their families are having to go through this stressful process. I know that moving a loved one into residential care is something none of us want to have to do. I've faced this with my mother and recognise from my own experience how heartbreakingly painful it is and how stressful it is to leave them in the care of someone else. Again, I want to assure the families of our residents that if these care homes move to a private care provider, that provider will be chosen on the basis of quality of their provision and their existing track record with members of other people's families. Most service users and their families across Kirklees do in fact use good quality care home services provided through the vast number of private care home operators in the area. Officers have received bids which were being evaluated through a robust process. This has, however, been paused due to the call-in. Should a new provider be appointed, this new provider will have experience in managing care homes, have experience in delivering high-quality care services for people with dementia, and have experience in ensuring an effective transition for staff while maintaining continuity of care for service users. I look forward to addressing the questions you have. We appreciate the panel sending us a list of questions in advance, which has allowed us to bring together a list of detailed and complex financial information specific to your queries. As the essence of most of your questions is primarily financial and factual, and the answers you need require lots of data and figures, I will be handing over to Director of Adult Social Services for the Council, Michelle Cross, to direct the questions to the right officers for your details, or where appropriate, back to me. Michelle?
Thanks, Councillor Reddy. So if it's acceptable to the Chair, because I don't think it was clear at the beginning, because there are 21 lines of inquiry. Do you want us to go through the questions one by one and then panel members ask questions at the end?
Yes.
Would that be acceptable?
Yes, that would be fine. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay. Just a couple of things, because there are 21, there are some slight overlaps, but we'll make it clear where they are to panel members. I think, like Councillor Addy has said, we really do want to be open, but some of these do fall slightly outside of the lines of inquiry, but that is fine. We do have answers to all 21. And I think that will help the panel formulate their decision at the end of this session. I'd like to invite Kevin and John in the first instance to present the information that will cover the two areas validated for the calling. Thank you. Kevin and John.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Mulvaney, Service Director for Finance.
Hello, everyone. My name's John Haig. I'm Finance Manager for Adult Social Care. Yes, hello, everybody. We've already provided to the panel analysis around a multi-year analysis, but I'll move on then into the questions. We've prepared responses to those. The first one that was raised was around the estimated savings changing from 1.25 to 2 million down to 0.8 million. So that's the first one to address. Savings have been modelled on the budgeted cost for each care home based on high occupancy and full staffing levels compared to the cost of private sector provision. These budgets are currently factored into the Council's medium-term financial strategy. We can only save in budget terms what's already stated in the budget, but in reality the running costs have been higher than the budget, and the real terms benefit would actually have been higher than that. But the savings estimates themselves have not changed. The figures referenced in the Cabinet reports just represent different views of the same analysis, but with or without non-cashable overheads. The previously used calculation of 1.8 million was inclusive of direct costs, which include staff, buildings, cleaning, transport, equipment, furniture, catering, uniform, etc., at 867,000. These are directly cashable, i.e. they could be immediately released as a saving. This is the relevant figure for the savings proposal. Alongside that, there are also corporate overheads and capital depreciation. The sites would incur and utilise corporate overheads such as finance, HR, payroll, legal support from across the council. As these are provided by other parts of the council, they're not immediately cashable, and therefore for transparency we're reporting the direct cashable savings in the social care budget only. There are separate savings proposals around a range of the council's enabling functions, e.g. HR, finance, business support, but they're not included in the figure being quoted as the saving. Also, the sites would incur depreciation charges. This is a technical accounting entry based on the asset value, but has no direct bottom line impact on the delivery of the service. The sum of the corporate overheads estimated allocation and the depreciation adjustment would be circa 900,000. If they were included in the analysis for indicative purposes on top of the direct costs, the total would be in the region of 1.8 million. The latter two factors are not directly cashable, however, and would not be realised as direct savings. The savings proposal therefore only includes the direct costs element of the 867,000. This has not changed. It's just a different analysis of the figures in terms of what is and isn't included. So that's question one. Is that okay? The next question was what additional financial figures were given to the portfolio holder to justify reduction in savings? Can these be provided to the panel? Is there a reason why they can't be shared? And if so, what is this? As we've clarified in the response to the first question, there hasn't actually been any reduction in the savings. Next one would be, what would the financial savings have been if the homes had a 100% bed occupancy rate? It's not possible to provide an accurate figure for 100% occupancy, as it's not a realistic level due to turnover, seasonal variations and use of respite bed care. The saving has been modelled on a 90% level, which is more realistic. For indicative comparison only, a saving could be in the range of 500,000 to 600,000 based on 100% occupancy and based on direct budgeted cost. However, to repeat, that's not a realistic operational level and is only an estimate for the purposes of the question.
Thanks, John. I'll invite Saf Booter.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Saf Booter. I'm a Head of Service in Adult Social Care, and I'll go through the next set of questions. I'll read the questions first and then go through the responses. So the fourth question was, why was only 1 year's financial figures used in deciding that the two homes were financially unviable, which was a year when occupancy was not at full capacity? Has a multi-year analysis been done and shared, and when was it shared? So in response, the financial analysis which informs the proposals for the transfer of both care homes is based on a multi-year analysis of historical financial performance data alongside future projections on financial viability. And the panel have been provided with the actuals over the last few years for these care homes. You should have had that information shared with you. In terms of budget saving, the amounts that can be realised can only be what is currently in the Council's budget, so what is currently in the Council's medium-term financial plan. And as such, the 2025-26 budget levels have been used to determine the potential saving. Such information has previously been shared with family members who attended the care home finance meeting in November 2023. The information was also published on the care home consultation section of the Council's website and has also been provided through Freedom of Information requests. Next question then was, during 2023-24, what was the occupancy rate for each care home and what income did this provide in fees? I can confirm that the average occupancy over the year for Castle Grange was 91%. Now I need to add that this has been based on the capacity of 30 beds, not the entirety of 40 beds. Panel members may be aware that one of the dementia day services, the Homestead, was decanted out of its usual base and was based at Castle Grange. So a 10-bedded wing was used by the Homestead, and therefore the 91% has been based on the occupancy of 30 beds at Castle Grange. At Claremont House, the occupancy was averaged over the year of 64%. Now, to explain that, there were a number of beds that were closed during the year due to conditions works undertaken in those bedrooms and due to recruitment issues. So 10 beds were closed during that year to undertake those decorations and those conditions works. The income levels for the year in question, 2023-24, were for Castle Grange 507,399 and for Claremont House 289,041 pence. Okay. Question 6 then was, what would the income have been if the two homes were occupied at 90% to 100%? In response to that question, it isn't possible to accurately determine what the income would have been if the homes were occupied at that level. This is because the income collected is determined by who the residents are that reside in the establishment. Each of them will have different levels of dependency, different levels of complexity. Each resident pays a contribution that is determined by a financial assessment, and that is based on their individual or personal financial circumstances. Most residents in those care homes are not self-funders. They make some contribution towards their care, and the council therefore subsidises the remaining cost of that care. And also the council does not charge top-up fees. Okay. Question 7 was, why were the homes not open again for new residents after the decision was made to not close them? Councillor Addy has already mentioned this in her statement, but I can confirm that both homes were open to new residents. However, it is important to note the following, that in Castle Grange until very recently, the homestead continued to be situated within one of the 10-bedded suites. Now that service has now moved out into the new setting in Murfield, and now following a period of some required maintenance work, it is intended that the vacant rooms will be filled. At Claremont House, the filling of the beds at Claremont House had been delayed due to a need to recruit and a need to staff up to enable the home to meet the additional support needs at Claremont House, and recruitment is ongoing. Question 8 was, how many inquiries were made from July 2024 to date from relatives regarding a bed? Now, although we don't feel this question is within the scope of this call-in, we can inform the panel that since July 2024, a total of 62 assessments have been received by the care homes for consideration for both long stay and short stay admissions. So the care homes support people with long stay beds as well as short stay or respite beds. Now, Castle Grange have admitted 1 service user for long stay since July, and 4 beds have been regularly used to support with short stays or respite. Claremont House have admitted 5 service users for long stay since July 2024. Okay, the next question was, when it had been agreed to not close the homes, why weren't more staff recruited on a temporary contract or a casual contract rather than using agency staff? So in response to that, recruitment has and continues to be carried out within both homes to increase the number of substantive staff employed and reduce the need for agency workers. Now, to recruit within the care homes, there are several employment checks that need to be made, and that goes back to leaving school age right through to their current employment, and that's all in line with safer recruitment principles. So the staff cannot start also without a valid DBS check and other employment checks. That takes time. Now, all of that being carried out can take up to 3 months to be returned. So the recruitment timeline can be extensive. In the interim, safe staffing levels still need to be maintained, and hence there's been some use of casual staff and agency staff. Now, I must add also that the process, irrespective of whether we're recruiting permanent staff, temporary staff or casual staff, the same safer recruitment principles are applied. Yes.
Thanks, staff. I think back to John and Kevin for question 10.
Yep, thank you. So question 10, for the 1.86 million paid to a care agency for temporary staff, how many hours of staffing was provided? How many hours of staff could have been provided on a casual staff bank run by Kirklees? Firstly, the figure of 1.86 million quoted in the question as agency spend is not one that we recognise in relation to the 2 homes. With regard to the financial ledger, the staffing costs for hired and agency staff in the period April 23 to March 24 were £397,461 across the 2 homes. In terms of hired agency staff cost as a share of the total employee cost, For the two, that equates to 10.66% in that particular year, which, as has been mentioned previously, is in the range of usual tolerances.
Thanks, John. And I think it's over to me for question 11 and 12, which I think is similar to what staff has already answered in terms of agency, so I'll keep this as brief as possible. So question 11, why was agency staff spend authorised after a decision to keep the homes open rather than recruit additional staff? It's always been our intention to fill the vacant beds, following the decision to keep them open, but obviously we have to make sure that we do safe recruitment and agency staff are utilised to operate safe. Staffing levels, because they are registered provision, you have to have minimum staffing levels to operate each homes. Question 12, from July 24 to present, how many new staff have been recruited for both homes, and were there hours given to existing staff? We've recruited 11 new starters, 11 new starters at Castle Grange and 11 new starters at Claremont House. And staff are always offered extra hours to fill rota gaps. That's always part and parcel of our practice across the homes. We've also recruited 3 coordinators and domestic and laundry assistants during that period of time as well. Question 13, would the potential savings be what would this potential savings be if the 1.8 had not been given and not been spent on agency? I think we've all answered that question. The actual spend on agency is 397, so just short of 400,000. And then how spend on agency how is it monitored? Have other mitigations been considered before going to read agency? We monitor this through rota and shift allocation, approval of agency invoices, review of rotas and resident dependency levels. We have budget monitoring meetings with service managers, and the head of service has oversight of that. We also have budget monitoring meetings with our finance officers, and that is shared at senior level SLTs. Thank you.
So over to me next for the next question. So the next question was, when were major repairs such as the roof, electrics and lift last repaired? Were these factored into the savings, or are these additional costs? Now, in response, like any building-based service, aspects of planned and unplanned works to the building are budgeted for to ensure continuity of safe services, and the service would review this in collaboration with our colleagues in corporate landlord. However, both buildings are more than 20 years old, and there are times where major works or repairs are required. This includes the kitchen and ensuite bathroom upgrades at Claremont House. They were done during 23-24. Repairs to the roof at Claremont House, which was in 2024 April, and repairs to the lift at Claremont House. Most of these are additional costs to the revenue budget and have not been included in the proposed saving. Okay, so these are costs that haven't been included. We would consider them to be capital costs. Question 16 was the overspend for Castle Grange was 418,000, with Claremont House 5,000. What are the reasons for a difference in overspend at each home? We can advise the panel that a range of factors have contributed to the actual levels of spend across each care home. These are 2 different homes. Both homes have been used in different ways. Some of these factors include things I've mentioned already. So, for example, Castle Grange was used to accommodate a day service decanting, and that led to a reduction in bed capacity and therefore reduced income levels. There are operational pressures linked to increasing complexity of residents, and that requires safe staffing levels. There are workforce pressures based on reduced staffing capacity and the need to offer additional hours, overtime and agency staffing, ensuring safe staffing levels throughout. And then there are costs of the conditions and the defect works required to the services. Question 17 was, as the homes had reduced occupancy, were Cabinet made aware that by not accepting new residents when they sold to private providers, they would not receive best value? I can confirm that both care homes are and have been open to new residents throughout, And just for completeness, we have taken on new residents, and the numbers were mentioned earlier. Question 18. There are a number of other buildings across Kirklees that are being repaired or require repairs across other services in Kirklees. What specific reason regarding repairs on the care homes equated to the decision for them to be closed? I want to clarify that no decision has been made to close either of these care homes. Question 19 was, will there be an agreement for Kirklees to support private providers until the homes become viable within 1 to 5 years? Now, whilst this we feel is not in the scope of the call-in, I can confirm that any proposed sale of the assets and the transfer of the business as going concerns will be based on a full and final completion on exchange of contracts. The Council will have no financial nor operational responsibility for these care homes once the sale is complete, with the exception of the contract that the Council will have in place with the new care home provider for the provision of personal care services in a care home. So this is a contract that we have with all care homes in Kirklees, and that enables each resident to be transferred to the new provider via a placement agreement. So each resident holds that placement agreement, and that sets out the roles, responsibilities and the terms of that stay with the care home. Question 20 was, if Kirklees Council are not able to run these care homes on a viable basis, how is it possible for private providers to do so? What is the attraction for a private investor? The Council's higher cost structure and financial constraints makes it challenging to operate the homes at a break-even point. The independent sector's ability to manage costs differently allows them to operate the homes viably. This difference in operational and financial dynamics underpins the Council's decision to consider transferring the homes to private operators. And this is why the vast majority of residential care in Kirklees, as well as across England, is delivered via independent sector organisations. The next question was, what repairs, replacements, improvements are required for each care home building, and have they been costed by professionals? Again, we didn't feel this was in the scope of the call-in, but however, I can confirm that both care homes have had vendor surveys undertaken by specialists to satisfy the due diligence requirements of a potential sale of the properties. These surveys provided an outline of the fabric, mechanical and electrical installations, including the current age, the test status, the life remaining in those equipments, etc., based on a visual inspection by the surveyor. These surveys also provided an indicative cost breakdown of proposed repairs and other recommendations. Question 20 or 22 was, in the report, it advises that capital investment was not captured in an analysis and could amount to 1.4 million over the next 5 years. How have those costs been calculated if not captured in an analysis? I can confirm that these costs have been calculated based on information that the Council holds on the fabric, conditions and defects of corporate properties. It is important here to acknowledge the difference between capital costs and revenue costs. And as we've set out earlier, the financial business case for the savings proposal has been based on the budgeted revenue costs. Now, these are the day-to-day operational costs incurred in running these services. Capital costs have been captured in a separate analysis, but these have not been included in the savings calculation. I must add that if they were included, then the benefit would be a lot higher than the 0.86 million that's been quoted. And then question 23 was the income of 750,000 relating to bed occupancy of 57%. Has this been offset against the cost in expenses of running the homes? In response, the income has been offset against the costs of running the homes and therefore reduces the net budget. Okay.
Thanks, staff. And I think Sorry, there's a lot of questions, but I think we're at the end, and Councillor Addy, you'd like to take the last question. Thank you.
Yes, yes, the final question was asking about benchmarking against other local authorities taking place when transferring to private providers, especially around what happens to staff and the buildings, etc. It's a little aside from the general scope of this call-in. However, I can confirm that officers have undertaken a review of similar processes undertaken by local authorities, and they've taken lessons from those in coming together with their reports. We've hopefully tried to answer in as much detail as possible. Sometimes it's hard spoken responses with finance and figures and data, and I believe we've answered all the questions, and if you have got any supplementaries, you want any clarification as a panel, we can assure you that so many of the questions have sort of come up again and again. They've come up in council, they've come up in cabinet. I have tried to answer them there, and many of these questions have been answered, and some of these figures that keep coming up that aren't correct keep coming back because they've got out there into the public domain. But I can assure you that the figures we've given you today are correct, and do correct those massive figures in some cases that are way out of scope, such as the agency costs. That, you know, they're just not right. They're there in the council accounts, you know, you can see those. And additional background and information has been offered when it's been asked for. It has been shared in consultation. Any supplemental questions or clarification needed?
So, panel members, we just so Councillor Addy would like to know if you'd like to raise any issues of clarification. Thank you. So, Councillor Firth.
You've covered most of it in just what you said now, Councillor Addy. But where did this sum, this 1.86 million, come from for care agency for temporary staff, and the actual figure is 397?
That came from a public question or a question in cabinet somewhere. It's come out in one of the questions that's been put to us. It's not a figure that we have held as the agency cost.
Well, thank you, Councillor, because that's set bells ringing in my head, because it's
yes, Councillor.
Can I clarify a little further? Sorry, yeah, I mean, obviously, that's the agency cost for the care homes, and, you know, there's agency costs across the whole of adult social care, for example, and that people often get mixed up with the figures that are available.
Thank you very much. So, would any of the other panel members like to speak, please?
Hello, Kim Taylor, Voluntary Co-op. I just wanted to clarify the information that's been given to the public about the multi-year financial analysis. We as panel have had some data. Yeah, we didn't receive that before, but we've got that now. Has that same information, has that actually gone to members of the public? Because there seems to be some conflict about whether that's a yes or a no. So just for absolute clarification.
Yeah, it has been. I'll pass it to Saf because he's got the details of when and where.
Thank you for the question. So a version of the information was shared. We held a dedicated finance session with the family members back in November 2023. John joined me in that session. We walked through a range of different scenarios, and at that stage we shared 2 years worth of actual information.
Right,
yeah.
2 years, okay, thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Helen?
It was just to clarify that we've had 5 years worth of data that don't, and I think that's been an issue that's been raised, that's not been clear how much is in the public domain.
Thank you. Councillor Habiban? Zaman, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. My question is, what contingency plans and cost estimates have been prepared in the event that a private provider withdraws, closes or fails to maintain CQC compliance with these 2 homes? And can you provide me with a breakdown of the anticipated costs of such a scenario?
Is that Alison? Is that okay?
Sorry. Sorry.
It's clarification. I don't actually feel that's in the scope of this call-in, is it really?
No, no.
already said there were their questions.
Chair, there's another point that's just getting battered about. The whole dynamic.
I'm sorry, Councillor Ashad, you don't have permission to speak at this point.
I'll give the permission, but the whole dynamic is getting changed.
No, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, it's not your turn to speak. Councillor Addy. Councillor Addy. Could you possibly, Councillor Zaman, could you possibly perhaps change your questioning into more of a can you seek clarification, please, only? Thank you.
So in terms of if the plan fails, what's the contingency in terms of the financial backup? Is the council going to come in and pick up the cost, or are we going to go back to, you know, the drawing board and say, well, okay, we've made a loss and we made a bad decision and this is where we're going to end up?
Well, currently, we are exploring sale. We have providers who want to buy the care homes. We were, until the call-in ceased the process, going through that. And what is our position will have to be reassessed, obviously, if that doesn't. But we have got very strong contenders to purchase the properties.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Addy. It's a reasonable question, Councillor Zaman, although perhaps out of the scope of the call-in. I just want to say, you'd said if it's a bad decision. I just want to re-emphasise that the outcome, any outcome potentially, will have a contingency plan with it. There will be risks that we will mitigate. I just want to emphasise the use of the term bad decision. I don't think it's fair on the public record here to phrase it like that. I think it's quite hazardous.
Yes, Helen Clay, thank you.
Can I just clarify, when we're talking about the decision around the purchaser, that you mentioned around quality, could you just expand for me on where would quality come in the decision making?
Can I press that to you? So obviously the quality is being assessed very rigorously, and it's the main concern, not the financial bid. Have some more clarity. Saf will take that.
Helen, again, just to reiterate that we feel that's outside of the scope of the call-in, because the call-in really is about openness and transparency of the financial rationale, and I feel as though we've explained that. The saving is based on the budgeted amount. You asked me earlier about actual levels and that we'd made that available to the panel now. I want to emphasise that the saving is based on budget, not entirely on actual. And just to reiterate, if we did use the actual levels, the benefit would be higher. We could go into the detail around the procurement process or the tender process, but that's outside of the scope of this this process.
Thank you. Does the panel have any more questions? Right, okay. I'd like to ask...
Clarification.
Sorry. Oh, questions. All right, okay. I've got questions after that. Okay, so where are we now? Final panel clarification. Okay, so thank you very much for answering those. Councillor Cooper, can you turn off your microphone, please?
Is there an opportunity for us to come back on some of the issues?
No, I'm afraid there isn't. All right.
Even misinformation. Even with misinformation.
I'm sorry, Councillor Usher. This we are going through a process here, and we have to stick to the process.
There's been misinformation.
You've had your opportunity, I'm afraid.
After our opportunity to speak, there has been misinformation throughout the proceedings of this event when it comes to the agency costs and that information, that number being put out there. We're not given the opportunity to get this. I think it's for the panel to pick up on.
I think we'll leave that for the panel to discuss, to ask questions on shortly, and on the next agenda item. Thank you. Well, thank you. We'll pick up on these. The panel will pick up on these questions shortly. Thank you.
Sure.
Final, panel. We now have 10 minutes. It's an opportunity for you to ask any outstanding questions. Would anybody like to speak, please?
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to say that all of my questions have been answered amongst these questions here, and I just wanted to thank the council officers for their detailed responses to all of this, and also just to state that we have actually received a large amount of extra material, information, data, which has been very helpful. So thank you to the council officers and also to Councillor Addy as well. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to be quiet, please. All right, so Helen Clay, please.
Can I just ask that a question related to that in terms of what people's expectation of what the panel can do and what it's actually looking at? Are we looking at openness relating to finance? Because I think there were some of those questions that officers were pointing out were not within the scope, and generally about openness of the process. I think there is a difference, there potentially is a confusion around what that is. Initially, I thought it was generally openness of the process, but I was informed that it was then openness of relating to finance. So
yes.
If we could...
Yes, I'd like to just speak on that and say that today the meeting is in relation to openness and transparency, the call-in decision relating to rationalisation of the finances and any relevant considerations. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question, please, in the panel? Right, I'd like to ask a few questions if that's possible. So, 2.12 of the Cabinet Report, December the 10th, the financial rationalisation here lacks robustness as it relies on a mere possibility or a hypothesis and does not actually reflect reality. Is it, and it says, I'll just read that bit out, it is likely that if the homes were receiving the standard fee. So it's not based on anything actual, it's just raising it as a mere possibility. So how can we rely on that paragraph or that information to justify this step that the council is taking? My second question, the scrutiny panel have never ever been provided with care home budgets or and we were only supplied with the financials only yesterday, and we only got those because we had to request them for the call-in. We're a scrutiny panel. How can we be expected to scrutinise any proposals from the council if we don't have the right information to actually scrutinise? And my next question is, are there any other financial documents relating to the care homes in relation to this privatisation that we are unaware of and have not been shown? My next question is, in relation to private providers, 3.22 of the Cabinet Report dated the 10th of December, it relates to a private provider alternative provision cost estimate, £853 per week. I believe that to be misleading. Private providers charge us locally, I've spoken with them, £1,400 per unit per week, which is almost double your estimate. So how can the council hang such a serious decision on this justification? And this financial rationalisation to me is therefore flawed. It's not transparent. I think I've got one final question. You've said that the year's financial data, multi-year's financial, has been used in reaching your decision, but why was that not evidenced in the Cabinet reports? Because you've only ever referred to 1 year, and yet you made a decision in in 2023-2024 to justify closure based on 1 year's data, and now you've based your data in the second report on the same data. When you're actually telling us now that you've used multiple years, why wasn't that stated in the cabinet reports? Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, if Scrutiny wanted figures, please do ask in future. Please. If the Scrutiny panel would like to ask me, and I will ensure you get them, I'm going to refer the factual figures to Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. So if we refer to the paragraph 212 in the December Cabinet report, where it states there will be savings of between 1.3 and 1.8 million, which included the overheads and depreciation, as John referred to earlier. Just like to reiterate to panel members that the council can only save the budgeted amount. That's in its 25-26 budget, and that is the difference between the cost, the net cost that it will take to run the care homes internally, with a comparison to the private sector provision, and that difference is the 867,000. As other colleagues have referred to, actual costs in previous years have been higher than that. So the council, what we are doing is actually being prudent by just saying we're taking the budgeted cost. We are potentially avoiding a future pressure. I think that answers the first question. The second question, how can you as a panel scrutinise the budgets? There is a full overview and Scrutiny Management Committee next Friday, which will scrutinise the entire budget of the council. In terms of individual panels scrutinising the budget, they are at liberty to scrutinise any area of that budget that they request. Obviously a big organisation, there are a lot of budgets to scrutinise. I think that's the second question. The third question I've got down, I may have got these out of order, was any other documents that have not been seen. I'm not aware of any other documents that panel members have not seen. The question about averages, the £853 compared to the 1,400, can I refer that one back to SAF, please?
Thank you, Kevin. So the average that was used is an average across around 57 care homes that operate in Kirklees, and they provide care for people who are older people, including dementia. And as councillors will appreciate, each care home will have a fee rate. Without assessing each individual in the existing care homes, we would not know what their level of complexity might be, which would then determine the fee rate. But the lowest fee rate that the council pays to any of those providers in the 57, I think, is in the range of £700 per week. The highest fee that the council pays is £948. There may be some additional top-ups on top of that that are private arrangements or third-party top-ups. Now, the council or officers have taken an average of all of those to determine what the financial calculation is. The standard fee rate that the council pays, though, for an independent sector residential care bed is £770 per bed per week. There's a slight premium if a care home chooses to be part of the dementia fee rate scheme.
Yeah, sorry, I'd just like to remind you about my other question in relation to you've actually told us today that you've based your decisions on other years' financial data, but it's not included in the reports. And I want to know why you've made decisions based on 1 year's data. You chose to actually close a care home based on 1 year's data, and then you reverse that decision, and then you have used that. You're now saying you have used that data, but it's not appeared. We've not been told that multi-years. We have not been told that in any of the cabinet reports. Can you please explain that? Thank you.
I will pass that on to Saf because he's been dealing with those analyses.
So, Councillor, just to confirm, when the Council or Cabinet were considering closure a couple of years back, there was an extensive public consultation. Those extensive public consultations involved some detailed finance meetings that were with the family members. In those meetings, there was a range of detailed financial information shared. In fact, the information shared in those meetings were very similar to the themes that have been raised today. What are the historical costs? What is it costing now? What are the budgeted costs? That information was published on the Council's website, so we had a dedicated section on the website around the care home consultation. All of that financial information was published. We did not publish, we did not provide the family members with handouts. So perhaps that's where the confusion is. We did not provide the handouts of the 2 years historical information because we felt that was relevant to council officers only. However, information was published on the council's website, I must add. Councillor, I believe you were in some of those consultation meetings where we had those discussions.
But it's not a cabinet. It's not a cabinet. It's not part of the discussions which make decisions.
Sorry, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper, please. I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to speak at this point. Thank you. I'd like to bring in Helen Clay, please, from the panel.
So it was just. Can I just say, I recognise how difficult this is for everybody here. I'm sure we're all feeling the pressure of this. And it's difficult not for it to be confrontational or combative because emotions are high. However, and some of this I think is because conversations haven't taken place before, and so none of this from I can't speak for everybody, but it's not a critique. We are seeking information. And some of that information, we correctly, as has been said, it's difficult to know what to ask for when you don't know what's available. So you don't know what you don't know. So that was something that's happened very recently that we've been aware of. There are documents that haven't been in the public, Therefore, I would like to propose that we have a private session to discuss the appendix that we were provided with this week following our request.
Right, I'd like to say I've got some things to read out here. So if we want to go into private session, can the panel vote that the public be excluded from the meeting for this part of the discussion as exempt information under Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended would be disclosed on the basis set out in the Cabinet report of the 10th of December 2024. So I need you to all vote on if that's what you want to do, go into private session. Sorry, I can't hear.
Please get a vote.
Do co-optees get a vote on that? Is it just the councillors?
It's just the panel. Can you just all vote now if you want? If you just put your hands up. Yes, everybody's part of the panel. All right, that's unanimous. We're going into private session now, I'm afraid. Okay. So Just going to ask their final questions, and then we're going to, the panel will then deliberate. Thank you. So panel, do you have any further questions? Councillor Habiban Zaman.
I've got 2 questions. So, given that the Cabinet reports and the portfolio holder have referred several times to the fact that other councils have privatised dementia care, has the Cabinet reviewed the outcomes of any similar privatisation in other councils, particularly regarding to cost savings, care quality and staff retention? If so, can you please publish those reviews?
We spoke previously about benchmarking, and they have looked at what's gone on in other councils. I'm not aware. I don't think it'll be hearing me, Habiban. You've got your microphone on. I don't think there's any sort of written future things. It's been very common recently, especially in councils where they haven't got many care homes and they're looking at the landscape of care and the costs. So I don't believe we've got any formal documentation of that, have we? No. No, we don't have any formal documentation of that.
Is there something that you are able to do as a summary for members of the public?
Yeah, further microphone. Yeah, we can provide you with something, Councillor Zaman.
Okay. The other question is, in terms of the staffing questions that were raised, is there any assurances that the council can give us that those staff will be tupied over to the new provider, and also their salary and pension rights will be protected?
I'm sorry, Councillor Zaman, but that question is actually outside the focus of area. It's to do with transfer of staff. Do any other members of the panel have any other questions? Okay, I've just got one final question. Where has the money come from to continue to run the homes since the decision was made to close and presumably is continuing? And where has the money come from year on year to plug the deficit?
I'll pass you to Kevin because he's got the detail of the name of the money that came in.
Thank you. So the money for running the care homes this year came from the additional adult social care grant the council got in 24-25, and then previous years when they've been running at a cost to the council, they've been met by the wider general fund.
Sorry, could you speak up? I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry. For 24-25, when the decision was made to keep the care homes open, the funding came from additional adult social care grants the council got. Historically, the cost of the homes, if they have been running at a cost above the budgeted amount, that has been funded from the wider council general fund.
Can you, sorry, just as a supplementary, is there any reason why that can't continue?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that, Councillor?
Is there any reason why the money from general funds can't to plug the deficit? Why can that not continue?
It has to be taken into context of the wider council financial position. So the council has proposed a balanced budget for 25-26, taking account of all its known additional funding at that time, but recognising all the additional pressures the council faces. So we've had to fund probably the best part of getting on for sort of 40-50 million pounds worth of pressures across the council around pay, demand, etc., that we are building into next year's budget. So we need those savings, along with many other savings to balance.
Thank you. Sorry, Helen Clay.
Can I just ask about something that was raised earlier about the local government settlement and where the funds for that have gone as in terms of whether they could have been used or can be used for the homes?
Well, obviously, the local government settlement often reflects rising costs, and we have got rising costs in adult social care. Extra funding we are going to be able to use to incorporate in the uplift for the fees for every care user across Kirklees, and very quickly, it's gone. You know, that is how it is. You know, there is no leeway. I'm just going... Do you want me to? There is no leeway in the budget at the moment, unfortunately. Unfortunately, statutory duties have to be met, and there's very little on top of that that we've got spare. Kevin would like to add something, I think.
So the budget that was presented to Cabinet on December the 10th last year, which was balanced and as I say, included the proposed savings from the care homes. At that point, we'd already made assumptions around additional funding that the council would get. I appreciate Cabinet was before the provisional finance settlement, which came probably a couple of weeks after, but we still haven't had full confirmation of all the grants that the council will get yet. So there will be grants there will be ups and downs. Some grants we will have done better on, and others I know we've done worse on, but we haven't got a full picture yet from central government as to the effects of the final settlement.
Thank you. Is that everything? Does anybody have any more questions? All right, thank you. We will... Sorry, I'll use yours. So, we will now withdraw to formulate our decision following the evidence we have heard today. The call-in timetable at point 7 indicates the options available to the scrutiny panel. We will reconvene in this room in due course. We will send a message through one of the officers from the governance team if this is going to take some time. When we reconvene, we will be in a position to read out the panel's decision and the reasons for this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you for your patience. The panel has deliberated, and I'd just like to say the following. Call-in of Cabinet decision in relation to the future of council-operated dementia care home provision, Castle Grange and Claremont House. The Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel has considered a call-in review request of the decision made by Cabinet on the 10th of December 2024 in respect of the future of council-operated dementia care provision. The panel has focused the review on openness and relevant considerations. The panel heard from all parties, both in person and in writing, evaluated relevant points raised in the call-in request form and weighed up the evidence in respect of the decision. The panel also considered all relevant background information. Thank you. To assist in determining the rationale behind the decision and if it was made in accordance with the Council's decision-making principles of relevant considerations, clarity and options considered. The panel wants to thank everyone for taking the time to give evidence which has assisted the panel in reviewing the decision. The panel appreciates that this is an emotive issue for those affected, but has focused on the facts informing the decision made by Cabinet. The recommendation of the panel is that the decision taken in relation to the future of council-operated dementia care home provision, Castle Grange and Claremont House be referred to the Cabinet with the following recommendation in relation to the areas of focus as follows. That the decision be put on hold and that Cabinet be provided with the full multi-year financial analysis in a further report and reconsidered the decision on the basis of that information. The panel also highlighted the following learning points. In order to ensure openness and transparency, full and complete information should be provided to all Cabinet members and published in Cabinet reports, such as the multi-year financial analysis, wherever possible, restricted if necessary due to being private information. That pre-decision scrutiny by the relevant panel should be undertaken to inform Cabinet decisions. So I'd now like somebody to move the decision. Councillor Bamford wants to move. Do we have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah.
Right. Can we take a vote on that? Can I vote here? Yeah. Okay. All those in favour? So that's 3. Okay.
Against.
And against? 2. Okay, that's carried. Thank you.
That brings the...
Yeah. This now brings the meeting to a close. Thank you.